The man is named Stephen, a gourmet who has traveled to Sonora, Mexico with his friend Remy. They teamed up to search for two local predators, the Peckery, also known as the skunk pig, and the coyote. The Peckery, resembling a wild boar but not of the same family, secretes a foul smell from a gland on its back. Despite this, its meat is highly prized as a local delicacy. Coyote, on the other hand, is rarely eaten and even considered taboo in some areas. Remy, an experienced hunter, and Stephen hit the road together. Upon arrival, they used binoculars to spot several peccaries and marked their location. They then set off towards a rocky area where the peccaries reside. Hiding, they observed a few peccaries. Remy attempted to scare them by imitating predator calls, causing the peccaries to flee towards their homes like runaway tanks. Stephen readied his bow and arrow, but a sudden speed change by a peccary caused him to miss. However, they later discovered blood on one of the arrows, indicating a successful hit. They found the peccary dead 50 yards away, marking their first successful hunt. The next day, they began their quest to hunt coyotes. Stephen, formerly a fur hunter, knew coyote behaviors well. As they enjoyed the sunrise, they played coyote calls on a recorder, hoping to lure one in by mimicking a hunting scene with the cries of a dying rabbit. Despite their efforts, only crows were attracted. Realizing their plan was uncovered, they tried a more direct approach but soon noticed a coyote watching them. They lay down to continue the lure, but it was too late. The coyote fled, proving smarter than anticipated. They waited and eventually saw two coyotes. Stephen shot and successfully brought down a coyote, which appeared well fed, concluding their hunting adventure. Next, the two prepared to cook. Once ready, Stephen began skinning the coyote, removed its organs, and chopped off its head and tail. They then tied it between two wooden poles and raised it over the fire. After charring, they soaked it in water to expand the hair follicles, facilitating hair removal. All hair removed, they used a hammer to crack open its bones, flattening it, and placed it on a grill. They seasoned it with cumin and salt, releasing a delicious aroma that made their mouths water. They flipped the coyote to grill the other side. After some time, the meat was thoroughly cooked. Stephen cut a piece, and they tasted it together. The flavor was indescribable yet exquisite and very satisfying. They enjoyed the taste and then drove to the mountains, as Remy had not yet hunted a peccary and did not want to return empty-handed. They returned to the previous day's hunting site and found the peccary family still active. Remy strung his bow and chose a target, a plump peccary, which he hit with an arrow. Although the peccary ran, it left a trail of blood. They found it at the bottom of a canyon and brought it back to the ranch, where they skinned it and cut the meat into pieces. Chata, the ranch's cook, was skilled in preparing various dishes. They began preparations. Someone chopped the meat. Another used a meat grinder. Chata mixed the minced meat with chili powder, preparing to make sausages. To enhance the flavor, they added garlic, rapeseed, lard, salt, and other ingredients, with chili powder being essential. After mixing everything, they cooked it in a frying pan. Meanwhile, Chata made several corn tortillas and squeezed a jug of fruit juice. Dinner was ready. They placed the minced meat on tortillas, rolled them up, and ate. The unique taste prompted them to compliment Chata. They were very satisfied with this hunting trip. The man, named Stephen, is a gourmet. Today, he returned to his hometown in Michigan, USA, during the prime summer fishing season. Stephen wanted to relive childhood memories, so he set out with a canoe heading toward Lake Michigan. The route was lined with vibrant green marshes. He chose a spot to disembark and set up camp. Stephen then took out his fishing bow, made some adjustments, and cut down a small tree to use as a pole. To successfully bowfish, he needed to use sunlight reflection for visual targeting. Unfortunately, after searching, he found no fish, possibly due to the heat driving them into hiding since dusk is their most active time. He decided to return to camp to set up his tent. After setting up, he installed 2 lights on either side of the canoe using logs he cut and tied across the boat. Satisfied with his setup, Stephen waited for nightfall. In the quiet wilderness, a bright light suddenly illuminated. With weapon in hand and a sharp gaze, Stephen stood on the drifting boat, focused on the river, though he spotted a duck. Normally, He wouldn't mind hunting it to enhance his meal. But today he was focused on a more significant task. As he merged in his surroundings, his concentration paid off when he spotted a fish. His first arrow missed due to unfamiliarity with the weapon after a long absence. Reassessing his approach, he struck a fish successfully on his next attempt. The fish struggled as he lifted it, reigniting his childhood thrill. The light attracted bigger fish, and Stephen, aiming carefully, shot them at close range, hitting each target. However, one large fish managed to escape after a vigorous struggle when Stephen forgot to tighten the arrowhead. Learning from this, he continued fishing and successfully shot another big fish in the head, enjoying the thrilling experience. The next fish was a local species known as the butterfly fin, recognizable by a spot on its tail and its unusually ugly head, resembling a bullfrog's. With enough fish caught, Stephen returned to camp, began scaling the fish, and cut them into slices. He sprinkled salt to prevent spoilage during the warm night and stored them in a box for preservation. The next day, the sun was shining brightly, and smoke drifted through the air as Stephen prepared breakfast. He took out the fish slices, smelled them to ensure they hadn't spoiled, and rinsed them with river water. Then, he soaked them in fresh water to dilute the salt, as he didn't want the fish to be too salty. Afterward, he collected some branches and built a grill. Stephen placed the fish slices on the grill, waited a moment, and then flipped them. When they seemed ready, he tasted a piece. The fish was very tender, similar to smoked fish. Delicious foods are to be savored slowly, and Stephen enjoyed his meal leisurely. Tired of heavy meats, he found the grilled fish refreshing. He saved the remaining fish for a snack and headed downstream, hoping to try his luck with a fishing rod and line. He used a small fish model as bait, which swam in the water. The boat continued downstream until a fish bit. Soon after, a fish took the bait, and Stephen jumped into the water to pull in the large, vibrant wild fish. It struggled vigorously until the end. This fish brought good luck, and soon Stephen caught a second fish. However, after comparing their sizes, he realized the second fish was not yet mature, so he released it. Stephen continued to paddle, enjoying the bird songs and cleansing his heavy spirit. As he progressed, more modern buildings appeared. He was entering the civilized world. He chose to land on an island opposite a resort. As night fell, Stephen began fishing again. He spotted a pointed fish and speared it with an arrow, securing his first catch of the evening. He continued and caught a larger fish with a mouthful of sharp spikes and scales as hard as armor. Despite its tough exterior, the fish was delicious to eat. The next day, Stephen made breakfast. He used pliers to peel off the strange fish's skin, avoided the thick armor, and extracted the tender meat. He then coated it in breadcrumbs and deep-fried it. The delicious fish fillets were crispy on the outside and tender inside, exuding a mouth-watering aroma that was unforgettable. After enjoying his meal, he rowed his boat, admiring the beautiful Lake Michigan. This was Stephen's favorite way of life. He is a top predator and a gourmet who braves various dangers just to obtain fresh ingredients and turn them into delicious meals. The man's name is Stephen. This time, he has come to the northeastern area of New Mexico with his friend Cody to chase antelopes. Upon arrival, Stephen spotted an antelope about 2 miles away. The two men grabbed their weapons and set off. The antelope, being the second fastest land animal on Earth after the cheetah and possessing incredible eyesight, can spot predators from afar, making hunting them no easy task. Opportunities often come only once, so they loaded their rifles before approaching. It was mating season for the antelopes. Males were busy searching for females on the plains, often becoming reckless in love, sometimes charging towards humans in their confusion. They encountered a rutting male, which sensed something amiss and hesitated before choosing to flee, causing Stephen and Cody to miss their chance. Just as they were about to give up, the antelope unexpectedly stopped on a hillside, seemingly not ready to give up on verifying whether the two humans were females. However, after a discussion, they decided to continue deeper in search of a new target, as this antelope had become wary. After some searching, they found another male antelope. Cody took aim just as it paused at the perfect angle and decisively fired. The antelope fell instantly. They waited a while before checking their prey. Cody, a traditional hunter, always prays after a hunt to thank the animal for its sacrifice and hopes its spirit returns to nature. It was 3 in the afternoon, and the weather was unbearably hot. To prevent the internal organs from rotting, They decided to butcher the antelope on the spot to cool the meat quickly and then packed it into separate bags. Each carried a backpack and began their return journey. Cody's father, Harold, excels at making a delicacy known as red chili antelope cornbread, which Stephen was eagerly anticipating. When they reached the farm, Harold had been waiting for a while. After exchanging greetings, they started preparing the meal. Harold cut the loin into even chunks, heated oil in a pan, and fried the meat until brown. He then added some flour and chili powder made from local peppers, which are both spicy and aromatic. After stirring evenly, he added a pot of water and simmered it on low heat for half an hour. During this time, he made some cornbread. As the sun set, dinner was ready. They placed the meat on the cornbread, added fries, onions, lettuce, and red chili, and topped it with some of the sauce. A delicious dish was thus created. Stephen couldn't wait to taste it. The aroma of the cornbread, combined with the tenderness of the antelope meat and the touch of chili, elevated the overall flavor, resulting in a delightful evening for everyone. The next morning, the two set out again, and this time it was Stephen's turn to hunt. As the sun rose, visibility improved, and antelopes were everywhere. Their task was to find a suitable target. Soon, a lucky male antelope appeared in their view. Observing its robust body, a mature aura emanated from it. Stephen identified his target and began to slowly approach the antelope, which was still unaware of the danger. Stephen hid behind a rock, quietly observing his target. Once sure, he sneaked through a wire fence, inching closer. Just as he was about to seize the opportunity, Stephen suddenly stopped. He noticed a row of houses in the distance and could not risk firing for fear of hitting a human. Reluctantly, he had to retreat, and they continued searching for another antelope. By noon, they spotted another male antelope, but an unexpected herd of cows appeared on the other side of the highland. Although the cows interfered with shooting, they provided cover, allowing them to approach the antelope. Using this cover, they successfully got within shooting range as the cows moved away. Stephen then proceeded alone. To avoid alerting the antelope, he crawled forward. The antelope seemed to be asleep, oblivious to the danger. Stephen adjusted his rifle and took a deep breath before pulling the trigger. The shot brought the antelope down. After the gunfire, calm returned to the wilderness, with only the fallen antelope proving a killing had occurred. Stephen touched the prey, appreciating its beauty before starting to process it. Cody went to bring the pickup over. They packed the antelope into bags and loaded it onto the vehicle, driving off. For dinner, they planned to make antelope with roasted chili and cheese. Stephen sliced the tender meat and flattened it with the side of an axe. He then gathered a large amount of seasonings, added them to the meat, and fried it in oil until it turned brown. First, he added chili, followed by cheese, and covered the pan to simmer for a few minutes. The dish, now ready to eat, was treated like a steak and savored for its taste, proving to be a delightful hunting experience. The man named Stephen is a gourmet, but some people doubt his cooking skills. So, in this episode, he plans to showcase his culinary abilities. First, he sharpens his chef's knife, crucial for dissecting animal joints and bones. In his hands, he holds a whole mule deer thigh, cut at a precise angle to maintain its structure and freshness. Today's first dish is roasted deer leg. Since the lower leg contains tendons and connective tissue, it requires long cooking times to soften. Stephen starts by making cuts to break down its structure. He then uses a steel saw to shorten the bones, which will be used later, and ties them with a rope for easy handling later. Stephen turns on the stove and takes out bear fat, scooping a spoonful to melt in the pan. In the meantime, he seasons the leg bone with salt and pepper, then coats it in flour before frying it in the hot oil. This dish is inspired by a fusion of different cultures. Similar methods are found in Spanish cuisine, and an Italian friend of his also makes a similar dish. After browning the meat, Stephen removes it and begins chopping onions and garlic, which he fries in the same oil. He also prepares other vegetables like celery and carrots, essential for adding flavor, and adds sage and thyme. Once the vegetables are cooked, he places the leg meat on top, pours in some tomato juice and water, and finishes it in the oven. For the deer thigh, Stephen uses fennel powder to neutralize the gamey taste. He prepares a mixture of 1/4 cup of salt, several tablespoons of brown sugar, fennel powder, and chopped thyme. He also mixes black pepper, coriander, and juniper berries in a cast iron pot, heats them, then crushes them into a powder, which he sprinkles over the meat. Stephen retrieves the leg from the oven and checks it carefully for any impurities like hair. He then creates a sticky surface on the meat with olive oil and applies the spice mix, tapping it in to infuse the flavors thoroughly. Next, he prepares a roasting bed with onions, garlic, and fennel leaves in the pan, drizzles some olive oil, places the meat on top, and roasts it again. Another dish is sheep eggs, which he cooks gently in butter, although one bursts unexpectedly. He slices it and tastes it, finding it chewy and rich in flavor. Stephen recalls a memorable meal with an elderly lady in an expensive San Francisco restaurant, which featured bone marrow. Inspired, he cuts deer leg bones into small pieces, stands them up, and bakes them, awaiting their transformation. With all dishes in the oven, Stephen has time to make side dishes. He cooks ground cornmeal in water, cooling it to a thick consistency, then shapes it into an oval in a plastic bag. Once set, he slices it into thick cakes and fries them. When the deer thigh is ready, he tests its doneness, removes it, and pours a bottle of red wine over the vegetables, heating it to create a sauce to enhance the deer's flavor. The marrow is also ready, clear, and perfectly timed. He then garnishes it with herbs to enhance its presentation. After a busy day, all dishes are ready, each distinct and full of flavor. Stephen slices the thigh meat thin. As friends and family arrive, he serves each dish, enjoying sharing his creations and watching their delighted reactions. Everyone praises the meal as one of the tastiest they've ever had, and they commend Stephen as an excellent gourmet. This man, known as Stephen, is feared throughout the animal kingdom. Whenever he sets out, he is sure to return successful. Stephen is a full-time hunter and a gourmet. Today, he is in New Mexico, ready to pursue Coues deer. Accompanying him is his friend Remy, who loves to push his limits and plans to hunt using a bow, presenting a formidable challenge since the Coues deer is a timid creature with keen instincts that can easily sense danger. However, the timing is favorable for hunting, as it is the mating season. Normally, shy deer become restless and less alert. From a high vantage point, the two quickly spot a deer, though it is a bit far. They decide to split up. Remy crosses the gorge and climbs the opposite slope, rubbing two antlers together to attract a buck. Meanwhile, Stephen stays put, continuing to scan the canyon. Soon he spots another buck. Deer are usually hard to find, but today they seem to be everywhere, which excites Stephen. He is determined to find a robust buck. On the other side, Remy, armed with his bow, takes the initiative. He needs to get within range for a clean shot, and now has a beautiful buck in front of him. To lure it in, Remy performs by mimicking deer calls and observing the buck's every move, trying to get closer. Unfortunately, by nightfall, both are empty-handed. When Stephen returns, Remy has already started a campfire. They share their experiences and spend the night. The next morning, they resume their hunting journey. Remy reaches a hillside and spots a buck about 350 yards away. With plenty of time, he decides not to rush and waits for the perfect opportunity. Patience is a crucial trait for a top hunter. Meanwhile, Stephen is still searching for deer. By noon, he spots one on the opposite ridge, but it disappears from view as he looks over. Deciding to investigate, he approaches quietly and crawls the final distance. His effort pays off when he spots two does. Although there's no sign of a buck yet, where there are does, a buck is likely to appear, so he patiently waits. His judgment proves correct when he sees a buck in the nearby bushes. Stephen slowly raises his rifle. The buck, oblivious at first, suddenly looks his way. In a swift moment, Stephen pulls the trigger. The buck falls, raising a cloud of dust. Stephen watches, needing a moment to calm his excitement. As he approaches, he admires the beautiful deer. Coues deer are relatively small, giving them an endearing appearance. Stephen drags the deer to a clearing, skins it, removes the organs, and hangs it from a tree to continue skinning and butchering. He is now excited for the next part. He slices onions, prepares garlic and dried chili, and heats oil in a pan to sauté these ingredients. He then takes a venison chop, breaks it with an axe, and adds the pieces to the hot oil. Once they change color, he adds the sautéed vegetables, seasons them, pours in some water, covers the pot, and simmers for a few hours. To maintain heat, he buries the pot in sand. Elsewhere, Remy is still waiting for an opportunity. A deer passes below the hill. He grabs his backpack and follows. When he reaches the spot, a curious deer looks at him, creating a somewhat awkward moment. The deer breaks the silence, but as it starts to hop away, Remy quickly aims. Unfortunately, he never finds the right moment, much to his regret. Today no longer suits hunting, so he heads back. As night falls, Stephen uncovers the pot from the sand and checks it. Inside, a blackened mess appears, resembling a dish from a culinary nightmare, but at least it's cooked. The two taste it. The ribs are tender and surprisingly delicious. They thoroughly enjoy their meal. The next morning, they set off on their journey again. Today, the focus was on allowing Remy to complete his hunt. Stephen directed him to an area where deer were known to be active, then let him go alone to increase the chances of a successful hunt. He also prepared a secret Wapona deer hide, which he draped over branches and placed in an open area to lure a buck. Remy continuously manipulated antlers to produce a clacking sound, simulating a buck duel, and intermittently mimicked deer calls to attract nearby bucks. Soon, a deer appeared and charged towards the decoy. Remy thought his chance had come, but the deer did not show itself and instead ran off in the opposite direction. Now thirsty and tired, Remy found this method of hunting too strenuous. He fell into self-doubt, and after a bitter laugh, faced the reality that he had to return to camp defeated. However, an unexpected event occurred on his way back. He encountered a deer just a short distance away in the bushes. This was a rare opportunity. Remy silently took aim, and the deer showed no reaction. He decisively released the arrow, and the deer, pained, ran off quickly. Remy, unable to hide his excitement, went to retrieve his prey. It was a young adult buck. Remy had finally proven himself. The man named Stephen is a full-time hunter and a gourmet. Today, he has come to California with his friend Hank, who is a chef. In his later years, Hank learned to hunt and has since lived the life of a culinary hunter. Sharing similar interests, he and Stephen have formed a close friendship despite the age difference. They arrived at the farm of a friend of Stephen's, which is populated with black-tailed deer, wild boars, and various small game. The first thing they did was set up their tents and then set off on their journey. They reached a high ground and began observing from above. The area was teeming with wild boars, though no black-tailed deer were in sight at first. After a thorough search, they finally spotted 4 deer, including a buck, which boosted their morale. However, according to local laws, hunting large animals on the day of arrival was prohibited, so they marked the location and planned to hunt the next day. With plenty of time left in the day, they decided to hunt some small game to pass the time and satisfy their culinary cravings. Hank and Stephen went their separate ways in search of prey. Hank picked a cherry along the way, finding it quite sour. Soon, he saw a rabbit and fired a shot but missed. He smiled to hide his embarrassment, realizing he wasn't quite in the zone yet. Shortly after, another rabbit appeared, and after 2 shots, Hank hit his target. The rabbit wasn't dead yet, so he finished it off with another shot, ending its miserable life. Although many people find wild rabbit meat unpalatable, Hank is renowned for cooking animals that most overlook, and wild rabbit is one of his specialties. With their food secured, they returned to the hill to continue monitoring the deer and wild boars, especially marking any bucks for the next day's hunt. As daylight faded, they concluded their observation. The next morning, they were on the hillside early, waiting for the deer to appear. It wasn't long before a buck was spotted. Determining its direction, they immediately gave chase, navigating the rugged terrain to reach a rocky area where the buck was active. Hank hid there, waiting for his prey, while Stephen graciously stepped back to give his friend a good opportunity. Unexpectedly, Stephen encountered another buck about a mile away. Energized, he navigated the steep slopes and dense bushes to approach from upwind, catching the deer off guard. The buck, stunned by the hunter's proximity, hesitated, giving Stephen the chance to shoot. However, his excitement caused him to miss the first shot. The deer, seemingly too shocked to flee, stood still. A top hunter doesn't miss twice. Stephen's second shot hit its mark, and after a struggle, the buck fell. Hearing the gunshot, Hank felt envious, knowing Stephen had succeeded. Stephen approached the robust black-tailed deer, satisfied with its condition. Due to the heat, he dragged the deer to a shaded area, while Hank continued to wait for his chance. which unfortunately never came. Meanwhile, Stephen started skinning the deer and sorting the meat. It was now time for lunch, and Hank was ready to showcase his culinary skills with the wild rabbit caught the day before. He began by sautéing it with onions until the meat turned brown, then added garlic and apple fruit. A great seasoning choice. He also added a bit of saffron, some leaves, and 2 chilies, then let it simmer on low heat. An hour later, Hank lifted the lid, pouring in some homemade wine from grapes grown in his backyard to enhance the broth's flavor. Stephen, eager to taste, found the soup delicious, with tender and flavorful meat that was memorable. After a hearty meal, the two set off on another hunting trip, this time aiming for wild boar meat. Although the area was teeming with wild boars, known for their cunning, hunting them was challenging. They split up. Hank crossed a creek to the opposite ridge, while Stephen headed to the oak forest in the valley. Soon, Stephen spotted a sow with a litter of piglets. The wind direction was against him, so he stayed put and waited quietly. An opportunity quickly presented itself when the wild boar passed right in front of him. Stephen decisively fired his gun, but the first shot missed. The boar turned and ran swiftly, leaving no chance for a follow-up shot. However, unwilling to give up, Stephen quickly pursued and was surprised to find the boar had already fallen. It seems the first shot had hit after all. The boar had run on adrenaline before collapsing. Just then, Stephen noticed another wild boar approaching from afar. This new boar only sensed danger when it got closer and then sprinted away, but it was too late. Stephen's shot was accurate, achieving a double kill. In contrast, Hank had not seen a single boar. Hearing the continuous gunfire, he felt a mix of envy and admiration. Stephen dragged the boars to a shaded area, removed their innards, and then met up with Hank. They brought the truck over and together, transported the boars back to camp. Now it was Hank's turn to shine. Though he hadn't hunted any boar, preparing gourmet dishes was another of his passions. The first ingredient was deer meat. Hank cut the meat into chunks and fried them until they changed color. He then removed the meat and poured homemade wine into the cooked onions, soaking the meat in this mixture. He added various spices, including chili, sage, and leaves, and let it simmer on low heat. Next, Hank took out a pig's heart, slashed it following the muscle lines, and flattened the pieces. He then coated them in acorn flour, frying until one side browned before flipping them over. A delicious aroma filled the air, promising a flavorful dish. He also made a simple sauce with morels and onions and placed it atop the pig heart. Now the food was ready to eat. Stephen tasted it and found it incredibly delicious. The deer meat soup was also ready, and they heartily enjoyed their meal. This was undoubtedly a memorable outdoor feast, and Stephen was deeply satisfied.